I'm from a small town in Southern Virginia. The last important thing that happened there was a Civil War battle 150 years ago. Since then, that's been about it in my hometown. We had a family doctor, grew up with my mother there, and he was kind of a colorful character, interesting guy, a little bit eccentric, and a brilliant diagnostician. One day my father was talking to me about him, and he said, well, you know, he basically, the doctor's name was Milton Endy. I recently wrote an article in USA Today about him. He said, you know, he basically invented the idea of stem cell therapy. And I kind of, yeah, right. So, you know, my parents always kind of like to build up their friends' reputation. Well, he did. I learned that about 20 years later. In fact, he did, and performed the world's first cord blood transplant, stem cell transplant, in our little hospital in Petersburg, Virginia, where nothing has happened in 150 years. And this was actually the early 1960s. The doctor had an epiphany in the shower, I believe. He said, I've never seen infants with cancer. Why is that? And he gets out and calls his brother, who was also an MD, and said, I'm thinking maybe there's something in the infant's blood, something we don't know about, but maybe that's a cancer inhibitor. So they talked and they came up with the idea of an experiment. Let's take some of my doomed patients who are 100% certain to die, and let's ask them if we can try something. I said, we're going to put infant blood in them. I said, well, we can't go withdrawing blood from infants, but we can do it out of the discarded umbilical cord or the placenta. And he starts injecting the patients. And lo and behold, they start getting better. They go into remission. Some of them go home. Some of them for lengthy periods of time. They all relapsed and all died. So he didn't save anybody. But clearly he had discovered that there was something going on there. Now, he never got the recognition that he should have. To this day, still hasn't. But nevertheless, he is recognized as the first doctor ever to do this sort of a transplant. But fortunately, during the early 1960s, you could do that. And I've asked a friend who's high in the Obama administration in HHS, one of my former students who's an official there, and I said, would what he did even be possible today? Would any doctor do that? We talked it out, and she said, no, probably not. Be worried about being sued, would be worried about regulations. One big inhibiting factor is he was a lone wolf. He was the practice. Now, because of red tape, administrative burdens, doctors are moving into large practices. No large practice is going to let him do that. They'll say, we don't really need that kind of trouble. Just do it by the book and leave it alone. And so there's a question of whether we are shutting off the frontier of what has been the most dynamic, innovative healthcare system in world history. And again, I think the ACA will accelerate the process of closing that door, closing that frontier, but it didn't start with the ACA. This is a process that's been going on for 50 or 60 years of shutting down the possibility of Steve Jobs types coming out of the woodwork and innovating our way out of this, finding new treatments, new ways to do things inexpensively. We have shut it off. I'll give you one more example that I just came across last week or 2 weeks ago, and if you look this up on the web, it is really fascinating. It's a story that CBS News did about a kid, 12-year-old boy, who was born with no fingers on his left hand. So a prosthetic costs about $20,000 to $30,000. And maybe you have a Cadillac insurance plan that would pay for it. Maybe you don't. But whatever, it's extremely expensive. His father decided there must be a better way. So I see a nod. Did you see this? It was a great story. So the father goes on the web and hunts around for, I think, a couple of years. And he finally finds some guy, literally in a garage in Washington State, collaborating by internet with some guy in South Africa whom I believe had cut off his fingers in a woodworking accident, and decided to make this his life's work. And using 3D printers, it created a design for a workable, functioning prosthetic made of plastic, just print it out on a printer. So a printer costs about $2,000. Printing a workable hand costs about $5. And they were showing the kid can pick up a bottle, he can ride his bike, he can pick up his book bag. They showed, I don't think it was the same kid, they showed someone else picking up a coin with it. It was staggering. And as they're saying, it's a $5 hand, not $20,000, $30,000. That's disruptive innovation. And the question is there any insurance policy in America that would pay for that $5 hand? They might well pay for a $20,000 prosthetic, but I doubt that you'll find one that will cover the cost of a $5 hand. And the $5 hand in some ways it's worse, in some ways it's better than the $20,000 one. You can break it pretty easily, but on the other hand, as he notes, if you lose it, if you break it, if you outgrow it, get another $5 and print another one. And furthermore, people are using these things in the way you use your cell phone. They're developing apps. So this father and his son were working on, okay, we could improve it slightly by doing this, and they pass it around on the internet, and little by little, people in their garages, tinkerers, come up with better ways of doing this. And over time, they begin to improve it to the point that just like the first Macs were pretty lousy compared with the mainframe. Now an iPhone's better than the biggest mainframe from 30 years ago. Similarly, these hands may not do everything that the $20,000, $30,000 one does, but if they're allowed to flourish, they're going to be better. That's disruptive innovation, and that's what the system needs. And again, the question that we're going to be focusing on is Mercatus, how do you get that? How do you get from here to there?